Recently, this new suspension mechanism has been changing the MTB world with its new design and functionality. In this video, we'll explore exactly what high pivot suspension is, its perks and flaws, the impact it's going to make on the mountain biking industry, and what kind of future it holds for manufacturers and riders. So what is high pivot suspension? Well, all full suspension bikes have a little something in the back called the pivot. The pivot is the point on a full suspension bike where the rear wheel is moved with the shock via a swing arm connected from the wheel to the pivot, which is pretty much just what and where everything connects to and what makes the input decision for the shock. If you don't understand, watch that last part back in a slower speed. Now that we know what a pivot is, these are the different types of pivot systems. A linkage driven single point, a horse link, a twin link pivot, and of course the odd one out, the high pivot. Of course they all have their advantages and disadvantages of how long they last or how home mechanic friendly they are, but it all comes down to how they react with objects in their path. I won't bore you with how specifically they work in different types of situations, but this is basically all you need to know. On a system like a single pivot, an encounter with a rock would cause the system and wheel to move forward, further into the frame, and allow the suspension to move in that way. This system is cheap for manufacturers to use for two reasons. The general system is cheap when considering the bearings and repair costs and time, and the system is not patented, meaning that the bike companies don't have to pay royalties to use that system, which further cuts down on costs. Whereas a twin link pivot system would make the wheel push up and allow the suspension to push down into itself. This is what most of the mid to high range trail bikes use. Next we have the horse link. With this system, the energy from the drop carries through complicated and expensive linking systems, resulting in the suspension system pushing up diagonally into the frame,
whilst also meeting at two other points near the chainring.
But how does a high pivot system work? Well, a Pink Bike article from 2018 states, high pivot bikes have a physical pivot, or an instant center, much higher than the top of the chainring. A high pivot can create a rearward path at the axle, which, in theory, allows the rear wheel to more easily move away from and then over an obstacle, meaning that the bikes can carry more momentum through rough sections of the trail. This kind of technology means a lot for the industry, as it will simply make the bikes better, faster, and more aggressive. Some examples of where we've been seeing this bike lately are in a lot of downhill bikes, like the Canyon Sender and Trek Session. Our gathering from 23 reviews of the bikes, and specifically the suspension system, tells us that the bike helped them cut down on their descent times by a small percentage, and they had a lot more control and stability over the bike. So now let's talk about the future potential of this technology. Well, in reality, the future of this design could be trumped by cheaper, less complicated mechanisms. But that's mainly because of the current limitations and trust issues between this design and manufacturers. This is because the only real way high pivot suspension is currently being implemented is on modern downhill and hardcore enduro bikes. But why? Well, it's down to two main reasons. One is because the extra grip and balance benefits of the design only hold value to bike manufacturers in more hardcore riding. For example, in downhill bikes, like mentioned before. But the future can still be promising with the implementation of cheaper expenses on parts like the pulley, allowing the mechanism to be used on trail bikes like shown on the Forbidden Druid. So is this the next big thing? Will this change the game? Are the bike manufacturers ready to take the leap? Time will tell, but for now, I'm Noah and thanks for watching the Go Gang.